Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. I've noticed a lot of viewers saying that Back to the Egg was their favorite Wings album. It got me thinking, what makes this album touch a chord in people? Let us find out more about it. So, Back to the Egg was the seventh and last studio album by Wings. After the release of London Town in 1978, Wings band leader Paul McCartney hired two session musicians, drummer Steve Holley and lead guitarist Lawrence Juber, and they replaced former members Joe English and Jimmy McCulloch. Inspiration for the album? This was supposed to be a concept album, and the title of the album was going to be We're Open Tonight, but then Linda McCartney came up with the title Back to the Egg. So it's supposed to be about a band going on tour to a show, and the egg represented the protective shell of the group while they're on tour together. Linda is quoted as saying, "It started off being a concept album. It was a traveling idea where everybody got into their van on a rainy night and was heading toward the gig. But in the end, it just ended up being just songs." So Paul thinks he was smoking too much wacky backy. So it took 7 months to record the album. Before they began recording at the castle, Paul and the gang began sessions at Spirit of the Ranchian Studios in Campbelltown, Scotland. Then they went to Lipney Castle in Kent. And then after that, London's Abbey Road Studios and Replica Studio, the last of which McCartney built as a replica of Abbey Road Studios. Paul and Wings recorded some of the album at the Lipney Castle, and it was close to where Paul and Linda lived at the time. Paul knew the owners of the castle and doesn't remember how they got to thinking about recording there. The owners, Harry and Deidre McGarry, were rather aristocratic and posh people, according to Paul. "We would write and record, and then invite me for a drink in the evening, and I'd go and have a little whiskey before I went home," Paul wrote, and he remembers working on getting closer and much of Back to the Egg. So Paul and his band took a mobile truck to Lipney Castle and more or less went in and recorded the album. So the recording took place in the castle's great hall. Steve Holley's drums were set up in front of a big fireplace, and Paul and Lawrence played their guitars in the echoing stairwell. And the books from the library provided spoken inserts by the host Harold and Deidre McGarry, and that it was overdubbed in the kitchen. CheatSheet.com said Paul wrote that he and Wings finished recording Back to the Egg at Abbey Road Studio, but he liked the castle's atmosphere. You get all the kinds of slightly oddball things happening and oddball songs coming out. "I'm a bit more purposeful these days than I was then," Paul wrote. Paul said when he created Wings, he wanted to make music that sounded completely different than his time with the Beatles. So Back to the Egg had strange lyrics, and Paul wrote that sometimes he likes certain words, and he isn't bothered about it making sense. Wikipedia stated the design for the album's artwork was by Hipgnosis, the company responsible for the previous Wings album covers such as Venus and Mars and the Wings Greatest compilation. The front cover depicts the 5 members of Wings in a room looking down through space at planet Earth through an open hatchway in the floor. The statuette above the mantelpiece behind them is the same that appears on the Wings' greatest artwork, and the picture was taken by photographer John Shaw at his London studio. Photos of the individual band members appeared on the back cover, credited to Linda and Paul McCartney. Now, I always love the album cover. It's beautiful. So some of the songs in the album, Getting Closer. This is a rocking song by Paul. I love the guitar, and Paul's vocals are very strong. And Paul started creating this song back in 1973 when he was in Jamaica. It was supposed to be a slow song, but it ended up being a great rock song. A critic said the song was a mix of punk and new wave music, and another said it was like a song from the group Squeeze. Wikipedia stated Getting Closer, back with Spin It On, was released in the U.S. in June 1979 as the first single from Back to the Egg. The single reached number 20 on the Billboard Hot 100, as well as number 20 on Cashbox and number 22 on Record World. The next song, Old Siam Sir, it was the A-side of the UK version of the single, reaching number 35, and the B-side, Spin It On, in the UK was also a track from the album Back to the Egg. Old Siam Sir was also the B-side of the US single, Arrow Through Me. So I love the guitar start to this song, and then the keyboards chime in. Paul has his voice stretched to the limits at times, but he keeps rocking, and I love how the vocals give way to instrumental parts. And according to Wikipedia, Wings drummer Steve Holley, while playing keyboards during a studio session, he developed a chord sequence that was eventually used in the instrumental section of the song. Paul McCartney and guitarist Denny Laine later recorded an instrumental demo for the song called Super Big Heatwave. Arrow Through Me. This song is classified as soft rock, R&B, and funk. Lawrence Juber, guitarist for the group, said, "Arrow Through Me harmonically is almost like Duke Ellington could have written it." It was an A-side of the second U.S. single released from Back to the Egg, and it peaked at number 29. The B-side was Old Siam Sir, which was the A-side of the first UK single. So the list of instruments and players were Paul McCartney doing the vocals, synth bass, electric piano, clavinet. Steve Holley did drums and flexitone. Howie Casey, horns. Tony Dorsey, horns. Steve Howard, horns. And Thaddeus Richard, horns. So it charted on the Billboard Hot 100 at 29, and the U.S. Billboard Adult Contemporary at number 29. And then U.S. Cashbox Top 100, it was number 36. So this song was really smooth and melodic. And now we have the orchestra theme. And this album version of the song was taped on October the 3rd at Abbey Road Studios from 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. and involved some of Britain's best-known rock musicians. They included Pink Floyd's David Gilmour, The Shadows' Hank Marvin, The Who's Pete Townsend, Led Zeppelin's John Bonham, and John Paul Jones, The Faces' Ronnie Lane and Kenny Jones, and The Attractions' Bruce Thomas. The Who's drummer Keith Moon had been invited, but he died shortly before the sessions, and Ringo Starr declined the invitation to attend as he was out of the country. Guitarists Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page, all formerly with the Yardbirds, failed to turn up. So Paul did great to get that many musicians in one place, and this is a great song, and Paul seemed to be having a blast. It was like he was in his Beatle days. Paul said it's amazing how tightly they all played together, with people like Pete Townsend, Gary Brooker, Hank Marvin, Ronnie Lane, Ray Cooper, and David Gilmour. You would have expected a rougher, less controlled sound, but it didn't turn out that way. When you get 14 rock musicians together for the first time, they can be incredibly tight. So the Rockestra theme was released as a single in 1979 in France, where it was also the theme tune of a radio show called Chlorophyll. In 1980, the song won the 1980 Grammy Award for Best Rock Instrumental Performance. So Paul made an album that had a little bit of everything. He was rocking, he was funky, he was jazzy, and it all blended well together. There was even an instrumental song with a lot of great artists helping Paul out. I can see why so many fans enjoy this album so much, and I do too. I hope everybody enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would be greatly appreciated. And I hope everybody's been having a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of The Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.